Hello, internet friends. My name is Bay, and welcome to the Battle for Azeroth beta, the second pass for the Unholy Death Knight, which is unholy. And as with Blood DK, if you've watched that video, lots of cleanup, lots of tuning under the hood, which I will go over in this video, such as talent adjustments, spells and abilities that have been lost or gained, anything kept from your Legion artifacts or legendaries, any new graphics, a brief overview of the War Mode talent system, and any GCD changes. There's no true gameplay in this video or this series. Consider this more like a one-man podcast walkthrough, going through all the things from Legion into BFA, sort of as a primer of what has changed for your spec. The entire second pass testing VOD, of course, is located in the video description box down below. It is linked over there. It's over on my Twitch channel, so if you want to go watch that, where all the nitty-gritty, feel free. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave that down in the comment section right here on the YouTube video, and we can get into some discussions about what has changed. And of course, if you are new to the channel and enjoy my ramblings, consider hitting the subscribe button or even the bell next to subscribe to be notified when new videos are posted. So we're going to just sit here and hang out for a little bit, for a moment. We're just going to sit right here and go over all of the baseline stuff. Oh, man. Most notably, of course, starting out with all the utility-oriented stuff. Get that out of the way. Let me fix this crazy thing. There we go. Battle res was changed slightly. So your Raise Dead ability, if I can find it in here, is instant still, but it costs 30 runic power and is a 60 HP, 20% mana res, same as Warlocks, but theirs is a 3-second cast. The Soulstone mechanic is still there, of course. Druids have instant in bear form or a 2-second cast in other forms, but theirs is 100% HP, 20% mana, so it's a slight tweak, but mostly it makes Death Knights a actual DPS. I mean, if you're casting a spell, Feral Druid, you can't be DPSing either. So it's kind of a contentious point. A lot of DKs don't understand why it's 30 runic power, because it's still way more beneficial that you res an ally than not, but Death's Advance is now a baseline movement ability for all Death Knights. You can talent into a stronger version and also have Wraith Walk. You can have 2 mobility tools now, which is a nice step up away from the molassesy slow spec you are currently on live. With Death's Advance, passively you cannot be slowed below 70% of normal movement speed, and it's a 30% sprint for 8 seconds on a 45-second cooldown. During Death's Advance, you're immune to forced movement effects and knockbacks. And then, of course, Wraith Walk. Talented is a 70% channeled. You cannot do anything during the Wraith Walk for 4 seconds. You cannot be slowed below 170% movement speed with a 1-minute cooldown. So that is still there as well. So if you need that extra mobility, the Death Knights are not as immobile as they used to be, which is nice. IBF was buffed by 10%. So it's up from a 20% DR to 30% DR for 8 seconds. Still remains a 3-minute cooldown, and the stun immunity is, of course, when you use it. Death Strike was also buffed for the DPS specs now. So the minimum is 10% of your maximum health, and the heal is 35% for that damage snapshot window. Whereas it's a little bit weaker for the Blood DK, but they also have more HP, all that kind of good stuff. Reap Magic was your purge that you had a couple builds ago. That is now on Demon Hunters. Sorry about that. Also, your Corpse Explosion talent or synergies therein we talked about during the alpha side of this, or I guess it was the end of the first pass with the beta section. That is now a artifact, or Azerite trait, and you can get Corpse Explosion to be a passive. It is very different, and it only comes on certain Azerite pieces, but the Corpse Explosion stuff for Unholy is still there. It's called Last Surprise. You can go look it up if you'd like to. Apocalypse, the namesake. Apocalypse is baseline now. 90-second cooldown, instant melee range, doesn't cost anything. You deal initial shadow damage, so of course it will scale with your mastery. Your mastery is still the Dread Blade, so increases the damage of your shadow damaging abilities by an amount. This does also mean that it should not affect anything outside of the actual Death Knight. So it shouldn't actually work on exterior trinkets and procs and things. It should only work on your spells if the whitelisting, blacklisting is correct. But Apocalypse will burst 4 Festering Wounds and summon 4 Army of the Dead Ghouls for 15 seconds. And of course, the prefacing the last surprise Azerite trait. These ghouls, your Army of the Dead ghouls, will all explode upon death. Namely, of course, the hook with Apocalypse there. Of course, that's definitely a thing. Additionally, your mastery, yep, we went over that. Yeah, the whitelisting. Festering Strike, oh, the additionally part, is that now you do 2 to 3 Festering Wounds with Festering Strike, changed from 2 to 4, and they stack to 6, down from 8. So it's a bit more of a, let's get my Ghoul out here. It's a bit more of a quality of life improvement that you don't have to stack as many as often. So it's a little easier to stack to that amount and then also just have easier use for your Festering Wounds. To not have the weird 2 to 4, because then you can have a really rough 2 stack, 2 stack, 2 stack, 2 stack, which you can have to go 2, 4, 6 right now. But the chance that you're going to have that huge string of really bad Festering Wound stacking is definitely not anywhere near as probable now with the 2 to 3 and only up to 6 maximum. So that is how your Festering Wounds will work. They did just buff Runic Corruption recently. It's 1.4% chance per runic power spent, up from the 1% chance. The rune regenerate remains the same, a little bit stronger. But then people wanted to point out that Death Coil got nerfed. They made it 40 runic power down from 45. But they gave you baseline Shadow Infusion. So you have the cooldown reduction on Dark Transformation by 1 second per Death Coil. And the energy regeneration was removed for your Ghoul, though. So just transforming your Ghoul is way more important. And now with this hook there, you have the baseline cooldown reduction. While it's on, when he's transformed or not, it will give you the cooldown reduction no matter what. Which is a nice baseline. Everyone was taking that talent as far as I was told. So it's good that it actually is just baselined now with that regard. So transforming is way more important than just giving it random amounts of energy, right? I would imagine so. So that is definitely a big change for Death Coil. The Dark Transformation as well is a 15-second duration down from 20. 1 minute cooldown still remains, but since you're going to actually have more Dark Transformations more awesome often indeed, that you will then have this, you know, Death Coil CDR impacting that as well. So a little bit less cooldown directly, but you're going to have it up all the time anyway. And the Transformed Monstrosity's Claw, this is a side note piece here. Let me go over to the other target dummies. On top of the fact that you're going to have your Dark Transformation Monstrosity active way more often, at least in shorter bursts, but more often, the Claw effect, the Sweeping Claw, the upgrade here, which is called Sweeping Claw, that rakes for shadow damage that scales with your mastery, is actually a 360-degree AoE now. Oh, I have my numbers turned off. That would help. Hold on a moment. Let me turn my combat numbers on. Those were turned off from the previous test. There we go. So you'll see it actually attack this target right here way behind itself, which is super weird looking, I guess, because it's a butt cleave. But instead of hitting around the target that your actual Ghoul is attacking, I do have Infected Claws talented right now. That means that wherever your Ghoul is when it's transformed, it AoEs around itself 8 yards. And that can apply your Festering Wounds, which is a nice quality of life improvement just for the architecture of how the Sweeping Claw works. It's pretty good. And then you have Army of the Dead, your baseline cooldown. It's an 8-minute cooldown now, down from 10, and the Ghouls fight for you for 30 seconds, down from 40 seconds. Their damage is okay, but again, getting that Azerite trait to make them all explode for shadow damage, which will then scale with your mastery as well, is also a good benefit there. And the Valkyrie Battle Maiden, so I wanted to go over it. You saw that Gargoyle is moved over here. You don't have Gargoyle baseline anymore. I wanted to make sure I note that you can still make it your Valkyrie Battle Maiden. However, it's bugged right now where it leaves like 5 seconds too soon. It's based on the old architecture because the duration of Gargoyle is now 30 seconds. which is not the same as it is on live. So it actually leaves way early. So hopefully they fix that bug. It's kind of a bad thing that you actually get the upgraded fidelity look, but then it is a DPS loss. So yay, bugs. So we'll see if that plays out and gets fixed. But overall, I mean, everything you know about Unholy is still very much there, right? During Defile or doing D&D, you still do the crazy AoE amounts to everything you're hitting. You'll pop all the pustules on things. You pop all your festering wounds. All that stuff still works. And then everything else is what it is. Nothing else notably baseline has been changed. That wasn't noted right there. The big under the hood tuning mostly comes into play in the talent section. What are you doing? He's hanging out. He's no big deal. The talent section now is where a lot of things are going to go into play here. So looking at your base spell book here, of course, comparing it now to the talents that you have on live. So look above my head real quick. And if you watch the Blood DK video, you'll also remember the fact that the talent shuffling was insane. So that's what you have on live, and that's what you have now. So there's a lot of theming rows now. So your 57 tier is very much about like this AoE themed dot festering wound style. You have a really straightforward CC tier now. Then you have this like resource-ish tier, mobility and DRs, and then your AoE tier, and then your defining cooldowns here. So to go over what was lost, what was removed, I have a caveat here for all will serve for Rasputin. So all will serve summons that extra skeletal archer that just auto attacks and has broken animations and randomly multi-shots, right? There's a blue post about a month ago that says they're looking into all will serve to rework it or remove it. Not currently in the game yet or adjusted. So this is still a talent. It's thematically neat because you get the extra little little archer by yourself, but it's not going to be here for much longer. Blighted Rune Weapon was kind of removed. Castigator was removed. Sludge Belcher. I wish they would give you something to make the glyph to make that look, because obviously having little stitches next to you is neat. But the DPS benefit of the extra hook as well, and the fact that it AoE'd around itself all the time was way too strong. So Sludge Belcher's gone. Debilitating Infestation, Corpse Shield, Lingering Apparition, Shadow Infusion was rolled to baseline. Necrosis and the Dark Arbiter, which was replaced with Gargoyle. But again, you can still transmog it, essentially. Go to your class trainer for that in the Acarus. You can go do that. Updated talents. I'll go with Bursting Spores real quick because I want to go run over and show what this does. So Bursting Spores is 25% more damage, down from 50. And why this has been tweaked down so much is the whole Festering Wound bombs you can do are still a thing. And again, going back to the fact that you only can have 6, down from 8. So if you don't know about this mechanic, when a target dies, all the Festering Wounds on the target will explode. So most of what that means is that you're not losing the runic power bonus from having multiple wounds on a target when a target dies to someone else or whatever. So you'll still gain the 3 runic power per, up to, of course, 18. Now, the talent Bursting Swords is that whenever a Festering Wound expires, or, of course, is popped, they explode for additional shadow damage within 8 yards. So this is still totally a thing, and is kind of a problem with this talent against Ebon Fever and your new returning Unholy Blight. Let me grab some mobs here. Because I'm not going to even... Don't touch the big guy. Just get over here, kill this little one. I'm going to put 6 wounds on this target. And when it explodes, or leaves, there you go. So all the Bursting Swords still explode. All 6 of them. And they give you, of course, you get the runic power. That means we'll, of course, give you runic power as well. What happened to me? Festering Wounds giving you runic power. So, but the big problem is that this works in this regard to do those Festering Wound bombs. Remove the talents here. You can see what you're looking at now. So this is interesting because it combines with Ebon Fever, which is just 15% more damage on your Virulent Plague in half the time. And your new Unholy Blight, which is a 45-second cooldown, 6-second AoE debuff that isn't applied as a dot over the next 14 seconds. Because, also, a very similar architecture here, you know that your Virulent Plague through Outbreak, this doesn't actually last 21 seconds because Outbreak keeps ticking for 6, so it automatically pandemics and adds the 6 seconds to it. It's actually like a 34-second dot. The same thing happens with Unholy Blight. This ticks for 6 seconds and keeps reapplying. Let me go find another roughie in here. The 6 seconds keeps applying, pandemicking the 14 and adding overall duration. So it will actually be a 24-second dot overall. But that's like the dot up the world style. You have your Virulent Plague dot going on. In PvP, you can add even another dot to it as well. And then, of course, you can have your D&D or your Defile down as well. But this Unholy Blight, it's fun. It's not Faster Blight from back in the day. And Ebon Fever is good for burst, but Bursting Sores also can be shenanigansed in that regard, which is kind of interesting that this still competes, but that's a numbers tuning thing if you only can use Bursting Sores because it's great for single target and great for AoE shenanigans. I'm not sure where that will play out. That's mostly an AoE argument for numbers. Additionally, you have Epidemic now. This is a updated talent. This is a AoE spender finally. You may have seen this in the first pass video. We talked about it. So now you can spend 30 runic power to make your Virulent Plague erupt for shadow damage to the at the afflicted enemy and additional lighter shadow damage to all other enemies near them. So you have that Virulent Plague out and then you can make it explode. Wait, that's the wrong button. There it goes. But you can have all this stuff going on, all the dots. So Epidemic, very good for burst. Obviously, you can only do 3 in a row because it's 30 runic power each time. But having an AoE finisher or AoE spender, and you can still get your Death Coil procs. Your Sudden Doom does not work with Epidemic. Oh, heck. Sudden Doom only works with auto attacks on Death Coils. So no synergy there. Epidemic, of course, does work, however, on other things that Death Coil would also work on. More on that in a little bit, not to get too confusing here. Pestilent Pustules. This is a updated talent where it's a 10% chance when you burst a Festering Wound to grant you Runic Corruption. So this works on AoE bursted wounds either by Scourge Striking in D&D or Defile or through Bursting Sores. Making those Festering Wound bombs. If you have 6 up, you'll have technically a 60% chance. Not really. It's just 6 instances of 10% to proc Runic Corruption, which is crazy huge. On top of the fact that you're going to be hitting other targets and bursting other Festering Wounds, right? And that competes with the updated Harbinger of Doom, which is the 15% more Sudden Doom in 2 charges. And the new Soul Reaper, which is a big old dot that scales with your Mastery. And it gives you 2 runes when activated, but it doesn't cost you anything. I mean, if the target dies during this big old shadow damage dot, you gain 10% haste for 8 seconds. That's mostly a numerical battle. This comes down to this tier, because Harbinger of Doom works just fine, especially with Summon Gargoyle, but Pestilent Pustules and Bursting Sore Wound Bombs, like, where does Soul Reaper fit into this? Maybe PvP, putting extra pressure on things when they get low in health and try to get that 10% haste for extra rune regen and extra damage. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But that competes here. Then again, Asphyxiate is a 4-second stun. You have Death's Reach now, which is 10 yards on your Death Grip, and then kills Reset it. Kills it for experience or honor kills, reset Death Grip. Your new Grip of the Dead is a 90% snare, which is really funny in Defile because Defile still grows. So the 90% snare diminishes every second by 10% while the spell is active on D&D or Defile. So it's a really ridiculous snare. You saw Infected Claws earlier. It's 30% down from 35. But again, the crazy amount of AoE it does now, and the fact that you're going to have more of it up more often. Not a huge change, just a slight tuning knob there. And then I guess we're going over the Harbinger of Doom thing. I keep burning tomes here. Harbinger of Doom, we'll just take Bursting Sores for the initial damage. I'm not sure how this will work. So Summon Gargoyle now is 30 seconds, 3-minute cooldown, and the Gargoyle will gain 1% increased damage every 2 runic power you spend. So obviously you need to be pooled and actually have a bunch of runic power when you do summon your Gargoyle. It's kind of frustrating because it actually doesn't change targets if you change targets. It only changes targets if the target dies, which is a little bit frustrating. Let's do this. Summon the gargoyle down. We'll spend some runic power. I got this to 180 during testing, depending on lucky RNG procs and getting more sudden dooms with Harbinger. So, but that's obviously going to be RNG oriented. Doubling its damage is pretty easy. Let me see what it's at right now with one more cast. Yeah, we're at 120% damage right now. There's a proc right there. We can get one more maybe before it leaves. Yeah, that's 180%, 160%, sorry. So almost as good as I got. But again, Harbinger helps get more procs there to throw it. Because if you even throw a free Death Coil, it still gives it 20% damage. So that's a synergy there. But again, that goes against, well, what Sword we're going to do. But that's Gargoyle's work now. And again, if you kill a target when Gargoyle's out, it'll change targets. But you can't just change targets. It's like an animated dot now, which is kind of frustrating. They basically put the Valkyr AI on this thing and killed the Gargoyle AI you have on live right now. I don't know if they'll replace it or fix it, but right now it's a little bit frustrating, I was told. So, in that regard, your new bottom tier has some interesting potential. Before I go into that, let me double check and make sure I go over all your other talents here. You see Spell Eater. This is 30% more anti-magic shell, and the duration is 5 seconds longer. Wraith Walk we went over a little earlier. I mean, you have Death Pact back. Death Pact back? That's a hard one to say. It's a 2-minute cooldown. It's a 50% max HP health stone, but then 30% of your max health in a shield that absorbs healing incoming. But again, if you live with the Death Pact, your healers will take care of the absorb shield. So just more potential in either you need movement, or you need to be avoiding spell damage, or you're going to get chunked by other unavoidable damage. So you can take that. Defile is unchanged outside of the fact that you lost the mastery scaling on it. That's no longer in the game. And then the new talent down here. This is the weird one. So I kept going back and forth on the whole pestilent pustule thing and bursting sores and wound bombs. Pestilence, Blizzard has openly said they do not want the Unholy DK to use D&D on single target. But now, Death and Decay damage is a 10% chance to apply a festering wound to the enemy. Now, on average, it's only going to give you one wound. So D&D takes 11 times. Once on cast, and then once a second for 10 seconds. This still means that you can drop a Death and Decay, and you have your Infected Claws, and you have the easier access to stack your own wounds. And even if you gain an extra wound, that's possibly one less Festering Strike over the course of the entire encounter. So they're not really sure if this is going to stay. At least the Unholy DKs we were talking to in stream the other day don't know if this is going to stay in, because it's too much to have so much wound synergy. And there is an Azerite trait. Let me throw one more out there. Let me see if we get any more. We have 4 stacks right now, if it even procs. There's one right there. So there's 2. See, already incredibly worth it. That's a Festering Strike stacked. You can save a Festering Strike and just do Scourge Strike, which obviously do more damage, or obviously Clawing Shadows, which is just more straight damage. But that's a numbers tuning pass. I'm not gonna even get into that right now. So there's an Azerite trait that when you burst Festering Wounds, you gain strength. That's a problem because you can stack so much into Festering Wounds. And to go one step further in your new talents. So you got Whatever Will Replace All Will Serve. You got the new Unholy Blight, we went over that. Grip of the Dead, Death's Reach, Harbinger of Doom, which is the updated version. Death Pact, Wraith Walk, Pestilence, Army of the Damned. Unholy Frenzy I didn't mention though. And I said Blighted Brew Weapon didn't get removed exactly. So Unholy Frenzy is a ridiculous 1.3 minute cooldown, 12 second, 20% haste steroid that gives you Blighted Rune Weapon as well. So now we get into the thick of this thing, where you're going to be able to cast and put so many wounds on the target in such a short time that Azerite trait and this syncing up is a little silly. So it's very strong. Like the feel of this, we'll just cast one Festering Strike, put on a D&D, transform, and then we'll Unholy Frenzy. every auto attack applies a wound. So you're just sitting here doing this. And again, you're going to be having a higher chance to continuously proc because you're just eating wounds up all the time. You have to weave in your death coils. I'm not doing that just because I'm just showing how ridiculous this Blighted Rue weapon is. That's all just spamming Scourge Strike. And that's a really neat application of avoiding the Festering Strike, you know, application there. But that would then stack a ton of strength, adding more and more and more potential to making this like a locked-in cookie-cutter build, which I hope doesn't happen, because no one likes that, to never have to change their abilities or whatever. So we'll see. That competes with the new Army of the Damned, which Army of the Damned is basically your DK tier 24 piece bonus reworked. This works with Epidemic as well, so you can actually talent over to Epidemic. And Army of the Damned is a Death Coil and Epidemic. Reduce the cooldown of Apocalypse by 1 second and Army of the Dead by 5. So this brings down Army of the Dead to roughly a 3 to 4 minute cooldown, I was told, on average. And again, going back to the other Azerite trait, the other Azerite trait that gives your ghouls Corpse Explosion passively. Having more Unholy use of your mastery scaling through your corpse exploding, through more Apocalypse, for more Army of the Dead actually working as a major cooldown during an encounter is a pretty huge deal. So I wonder how this will compete, because Unholy Frenzy and this madness, Pestilence as well, or Army of the Damned with working with Epidemic for AoE and Cleave, and just being a really good all-around amp to the overall play of the Unholy Death Knight. So there are lots of choices here. I was very kerfuffled in the VOD, and I didn't really know how the different builds would play out, because they put a lot of potential in, like, you know, burst AoE, right? Ebb and Fever, Epidemic, that kind of stuff. Even Unholy Frenzy can work. You can just tab the targets between auto attacks, so you can keep putting up more wounds. So you can keep just doing your regular Scourge striking and bursting wounds during your death, your D&D, and then end all that runic power you've built up with Epidemics. Unholy Blight can dot the world, basically, because you can have 3 dots out, essentially. So there's potential here, but I don't know how anything would beat, like, this huge synergy of doing something like this. Obviously, very single target, but that's numbers. Hopefully, it isn't going to be all your numbers, but that's definitely going to be rather fun for Unholy to work with. So real quick, on top of the talents you have, of course, here, Unholy Frenzy and the new Unholy Blight are both on the global. You saw the Unholy Frenzy give you the animation, then you start auto-attacking, so you get the haste and the GCD gets lowered, but it's on the global. Any major cooldown is going to be, and Unholy Blight is added as well. And then War Mode. War Mode is turned on in your capital city of Orgrimmar or Stormwind. Doing so will then charge you to all other War Mode folks in the open world. And it gives you access to PvP talents in the open world. And of course, they're active in your arenas and battlegrounds and PvP islands. 10% more XP for completing quests and killing monsters. Additional honor for killing members of the opposite faction. And going on a 10 plus kill streak makes you an assassin for your faction, which is then a 15% damage and healing amp until you die. You pick whatever medallion you'd like, and if you want to read more about all this stuff, go check out Wowhead's Talent Calculator or WowDB, and you can go read through all of these. They're all unchanged. The build that went out today actually tweaked some of these across the board, so they may be finally doing some tuning passes on these, because there are some combinations that are a little bit silly. You can pick Heartstop Aura and Decomposing Aura and Necrotic Aura if you'd like. I show that off in the Blood DK video. But really, though, Ghoulish Monstrosity, which reduces the cooldown of Army of the Dead by 4 minutes, and then the Army Ghouls are summoned into a single Ghoulish Monstrosity. Doesn't work right now at all, but Army of the Dead syncs that with that and makes your Army of the Dead like a less than 2 minute cooldown for open world content. A little good. Just ghouls all over the place. Then we took Wandering Plague, which is your outbreak, also infects the target with Wandering Plague, which causes a huge shadow damage dot. When the Wandering Plague duration ends or is a spell, it'll jump. And then it'll last for 3 jumps in total, so 4 targets in total on Wandering Plague. So this can just help you do ridiculous amounts of dotting up the world. Again, you can Blight, Wandering Plague, and Virulent in PvP now. That's a lot of dots, just for a lot of pressure. You can also Pandemic, that whenever you use Outbreak, all enemies within 25 yards affected by your diseases will take additional shadow damage, and the duration of your diseases on them is refreshed. This works with Unholy Blight, so you can just keep your dots forever. So again, hence the whole dot the world potential if you enjoy that gameplay style for the Unholy Death Knight. But pick and choose and put together whatever build you would like to for PvP, for islands, or for world content. Again, ghoulish monstrosity, less than 2-minute cooldown on your Army of the Dead is just ridiculous with Army of the Damned. But overall, Unholy does what Unholy does and has some really nice theming and cleanup in the talent panel, as long as there isn't some crazy problem with numerical tuning. But that's Unholy. I have been wearing this shirt this entire time, of course, little mini Arthas. If you're interested in supporting what I do here and keeping me doing what I'm doing, this was made by Fabelina. And of course, a lot more of her designs are over on my Designed by Humans apparel store. She just launched her, or we did it together, the Azerite Days Guerrilla-inspired Battle for Azeroth shirt. You can see it right there. And of course, any of her 6 other designs in the Little Final Bosses category are also there as well. And of course, supporting me through this helps me keep doing this with other community artists and making neat things for you guys. But again, thank you very much for listening. If you're new to the channel and like to keep up to date, hit the subscribe button. Check out my socials down below or the VOD for all the back-end madness testing. We go through everything in a lot greater detail. It's like 4 hours, though. I mean, you strap in. But regardless, thank you very much again for listening, and I will see you all in the next BFA Beta Second Pass video.